James.
Well, so we're going back to Parliament. Where is we've seen some really interesting things happen over the last several weeks here. Number one, I think, is this fight between the RBA and the government on inflation, on interest rates, and this narrative of government spending. What sort of narrative can we expect as the government returns to Parliament this week about the way their irresponsible spending is driving up inflation? We've just seen another gift to another sector in the childcare sector with, I think, a 10% wage, 15% wage gift with no productivity increase. At some point, when is the government going to acknowledge that it's making the problem worse?
Well, I don't think you're going to see that at all from this government, James. If you believe in doublespeak, aka 1984 style, this government's got it in spades. They ignore the laws of physics, which haven't changed just because they got into Parliament, and the laws of economics, which have underpinned the way the market has worked for centuries, and that continues. So what I think we're dangerously seeing is the RBA versus the Treasury versus Jim Chalmers, and the RBA I don't believe, won't be influenced by the Labor Party or the Treasurers pleading or begging or false economics. The reality is, Michelle Bullock couldn't have been clearer, state and federal Labor government's spending has made the economy hot. And that means inflation's going to stay higher than it needs to be for longer, and it's Australians who are paying the cost. And no matter how often Albo and Jim say that's not the case, doesn't change the facts. And I think you're seeing it in the suburbs, right around our country, that people are struggling with their mortgages. And the RBA will not be bringing those interest rates down until it can have some confidence that the government will get its spending under control.
Now, Bridget, you can look forward to the Greens urging the Albanese government this week to put targeted sanctions against Israel, condemn the Netanyahu government, all sorts of other measures that they want the Albanese government to meet. How is that going to go? Because we know Labor are compromised on this issue. They have been all over the shop. They've shown little moral clarity. How are they going to cope with this new Green assault on this issue?
Well, I think they're going to have their usual flaccid response. I mean, these guys don't know up from down. They don't know ally from foe, and they're actually really challenged, particularly in the Senate, where the Greens do have significant numbers and can really determine whether legislation passes or not. You can see Penny Wong, as the leader of the government in the Senate, get quite worked up each and every time the Greens put one of these kind of wedging motions on the table. And I think they're going to be similarly challenged again. At the end of the day, leadership is about doing the right thing despite the protestations and the angst around you. It is standing firm in the face of challenges. And every single time a challenge is put forward, to this government, they fall flat and can't seem to recognise that you have to stand for something. And I think you're seeing that in the polls. The Australian government knows that these guys aren't on the Australian people's side. They're simply on the side of winning seats, particularly in this case with the Israel issue in Western Sydney, and protecting some of those ministers who have significant Islamic populations in their electorates.
Bridget, I also wanted to ask you, we had last week on the show Willie Packer, one of the investors in the Jabiluka uranium mine up there near Kakadu, at the Garma Festival. Anthony Albanese made a song and dance about how the future for Indigenous Australians would be based entirely on renewables and basically climate technology. At the same time, he shut down Jabiluka, which was a surefire investment worth billions of dollars potentially to Australian investors and taxpayers. What do you make of Albanese's? Do you think the future for Indigenous Australians is renewables only, as he claims?
Well, I think this is a classic case of 21st century colonialism. You can have the glass beads, not the mirrors. It's just insane. absolutely insane. We want to see economic empowerment, particularly for marginalised Indigenous Australians, and that means all options on the table to actually grow well-paying jobs in the Northern Territory. And that's exactly, the government is now wanting to shut those opportunities down. And we know Australia's uranium is going to power progress over this century, particularly as the world is seeking to triple its net zero nuclear energy production over coming decades. So it should be a bright future for Jabiluka and the Territory uranium deposits. Instead, once again, Albo is picking ideology over practical solutions that will actually help people.
James.
There was an interesting news snippet this week that out of Queensland, the opposition there, or sorry, the government there hasn't been running hard on an anti-nuclear scare campaign trying to tie the coalition to nuclear energy, because it was said that in the regions there's a lot less take-up of the scare campaign than people on the left had originally thought. Is this an indicator that the nuclear issue is going to be prosecuted as a top-tier issue in the coming election campaign, which could be sooner than we think?
Yeah, James, I think Australians are recognising that nexus between ideology and reality is real. The outlook for prices for their energy production, for the reliability of energy production is at risk if we actually don't get some baseload into the network. And they know that the renewable rollout is a disaster and it's not going anywhere fast, particularly as those regional communities that are having to put up with the 28,000 kilometres of transmission lines and the solar panels and the wind farms are saying, hang on, what about our private property rights? So Australians are looking at net zero nuclear as a viable option, not just to 2050, but well into next century, because if we get this nuclear positioning right, a bit of a grease and oil change at 60 years and these assets can go up to 90 years. And I think Australians who've travelled the world, particularly young people, know that if it's okay for France, if it's okay for the US and UK, it is something that should be okay for Australians going forward. And so I'm excited about having a sensible conversation that doesn't involve comics of three-eyed fish, etc., but a mature debate about how we power progress in this country going forward, and nuclear is going to be a part of that.
Hear, hear. Senator Bridget McKenzie, always great to chat to you. Thanks so much for coming on Outsiders this morning.